Hi everyone, for this week's track guide we're taking the Spec Racer Ford to Lime Rock Park full. I love Lime Rock. For what appears to be a straightforward, almost simple track, there's a high degree of difficulty in executing the perfect lap and completing a pass here. It's a high that no other track will give you. Everyone here should be at least acquainted with LRP from their days in the rookie ranks, but this guide will hopefully show you how to run consistent laps on the baseline setup in the 102% range without a draft. I figure a good draft in the Spec Racer Ford is worth anywhere from a half second to a full second a lap, which is worth as much as 1% by itself. I'm going to show you 3 laps in sequence from towards the end of a practice race: a 1 minute .226, a 60.259, and a 60.003. All 3 are on the baseline setup. Since the baseline setup has a certain amount of understeer at turn in and at power on, it requires a different approach to Lime Rock more than any custom setup, which will have as much understeer dialed out as possible. So I'm going to use the car's understeer to help me slow down at corner entry, and I'm going to throttle steer to get the car pointed in the direction I want. I am using a Logitech G27 with the H-pattern shifter. All aids and assists are turned off, and I left foot brake. Please make sure you're using the F3 box when you exit pit lane. Where pit lane merges with the front straight is after the start of the braking zone for T1, so the car on the front straight has already committed to the corner by the time you appear, and long before you can see them in your mirrors. It takes just a second to look at the relative box, so slow down, wait for the other car to enter T1, and then begin your own out lap. Here we are on our first flying lap. So again, I'm going to pause the replay at various points and walk through what we're going to be looking for a second. This first right-hander is called Big Bend, and it's turns 1 and 2. It needs to be treated as 2 linked corners, but it's got a really critical entry. So the braking, I'm going to break it down into 2 phases. First, I'm going to brake hard just before I reach the 2 marker. I'm going to start gradually feeding in some steering around 1.4, 1.5. If I'm too quick with my steering, I'm going to loop the car since the rear will be unloaded. So instead, I'm feeding that steering in and trailing the braking down to almost the apex of 1, right on the curbing on driver's right, and by now I've dropped down into 4th. My whole right side is unloaded, so I'm looking out for a lockup. A locked rear means I'm probably going to go around, and a locked front means I'm going to go straight off the edge of turn 1. As I approach this first apex, I'm starting to lightly feed in some throttle as I come off the brakes. I'm going to throttle steer and keep the car tight to the inside. If I'm left to the middle of the track, I'm too far to the left and am unlikely to complete this decreasing radius corner, let alone get through turn 2. Okay, so now I'm in the maintenance period between 1 and 2, and this is where I'm going to use the baseline setup understeer to my advantage. I'm going to feed in throttle and deliberately create a mild understeer state before lifting off the throttle and turning in and returning back to power. The goal is to have the rear loaded at the exit of 1, and by lifting the throttle, I create what is known as a trailing throttle oversteer state. However, I'm not going to let the car get to oversteer. As the car approaches a neutral state, I'll turn in and get back to power, pushing the balance back to the rear of the car. What makes this really fun is that while the car is briefly in that neutral state, I'm going to go down to 3rd. If I can't get my downshift done here, then I'll do it after the exit of 2. It's not a major sacrifice, but it is worth some hundreds. And speaking of the exit of 2, I really don't want to drop a wheel here. The left side is heavily loaded, and the drop of the back side off the curb almost guarantees me a spin into the inside wall. Turn 3 is called the left-hander, and its exit is vital for a good lap time here. I've stayed in 3rd gear, and I'm moving to driver's right. The proper approach for low-powered cars like the SRF is all the way to driver's right. However, I can't count the number of people I've seen who seem to think that that's an invitation to an overtaking attempt. So I'm going to take a slightly defensive line by entering in about the middle of the track. It's critical to have a late apex. I'm trying to apex right at the end of the curbing on the left, so I'm going to throttle steer through this decreasing radius corner. I'm again going to use the baseline's understeer to create TTO and get me through the corner. Don't forget to wave to the shark. Hi, Sharky! When I reach this curb on the left, I should be feeding in the power, and before I reach the end of the concrete patch up there, I should be at full power and with the wheels straight, which I didn't do here. Now if I got a nice late exit out of the left-hander, then for turn 4, this right-hander, also called the right-hander, I approach from as far left as I can. The baseline setup is going to require me to lift to about half throttle before turn in. As soon as I finish turning in, I'm back to full power long before I reach the apex. Note that there's a lot of camber here that falls off as I get to track out, so I don't want to be dialing in steering after the apex. So I'm finally going to shift up to 4th and enter no-name straight. If I do this section right, then only a very little steering input will get me through here and lined up to the driver's left for the uphill, turn 5. Alright, so for turn 5, I'm going to crib from the LimeRock turn-by-turn guide, which is available on the limerock.com website, and it's pretty much mandatory reading for everybody. So there's 2 keys to getting through the uphill fast. Turn in earlier than you think, which gives you better entry speed, and look all the way up and through the corner. This corner is really intimidating because there's not a lot of runoff. It rises more than 3 stories, it's very fast, and you can't see the corner exit. After the apex, the road goes sharply uphill. This compresses the car and the tires into the pavement, which gives the tires more grip, which both reduces the slip angle of the tires at that moment and allows you to add a bit of steering, which then turns the car that little bit more, which puts you on a perfect line for the track out. So I'm looking for that corner worker station on the right to reach my mirror stock, and I'm going to brake relatively lightly in a straight line. A lighter, longer brake works better than a short, hard stab of the pedal, although if I'm feeling my oats in the SRF, I'll just lift. Don't downshift, stay in 4th, turn in early and squeeze back to power and get down to the apex. Aim to be roughly in the middle of the racetrack, entering the compression zone when you add more steering. The trick to not having any problems cresting the top of the hill is to already be tracked out with your hands straight on the steering wheel. If you're still under cornering load as you get to the crest, be ready to instantly add a bit of opposite lock as the car gets light. West Bend, turn 6, requires more braking than the uphill did, but only slightly. My reference point is that big tree on the right. So back to the official guide. The curbing doesn't follow a constant arc. It actually bends in more sharply before the apex. Secondly, the camber of the corner turns slightly negative approaching track out. So a lot of the apex curve is big and steep, but there is a flatter divot in the middle. Car placement is critical. Be careful not to overdrive the exit here either, but do use all of the exit curbing if you need to. And in fact, if you need to, you can drop 2 or 4 wheels without too major an impact. I've even clouded the tire wall on the left, but as long as my car is straightened out, I can get away with those mistakes other than a 1X or a 2X. Like that. Turn 7 is the downhill. This is an almost flat out corner. In fact, some people can do it flat out, but I'm going to lift since I'm pretty much a chicken. How big a lift I take depends on how I'm feeling about my approach and corner entry speed. Hopefully I'm back to full power by the time I reach the apex, and I want to be as tight to the curb as I can. The further to the left of the track I am, the more the camber falls off before going negative at track out. So stay tight. The tighter you are to the apex on this corner, the more speed you can carry. You cannot carry that speed if you're even half a car's width off the apex. Stay tight. At track out, I'm up to 5th and ready for another lap. So this lap I'm going to let go full speed and just hit the highlights again. For turn 1, I'm going to brake at 2, down to 4, maintenance throttle. Invoke that trailing throttle oversteer. Turn in when it's neutral, down to 3rd. Stay in 3rd, stay right with a late apex. Back to power, pretty good. Minor lift, back to power soon, staying tight. Up to 4th gear, as little steering input as possible. Brake at before the corner worker station stand. Turn in early, back to full power, straighten the wheel out, get some wheel spin. Light braking at the tree, turn in, squeeze the power back, get up on the curbing, run down the downhill, slight lift, back to full power. So there you go, 3 pretty outstanding laps at Lime Rock Park all by myself with no draft aid. And that's going to get you a real solid finish, probably a podium in just about any field, unless you're in a field that's full of nothing but fins, and if you are, you're dead meat, and why are you watching this video anyways? So before I end this, I want to make one final note. Remember what I said earlier about there being a huge draft for the SRF and it being responsible for half to a full second of lap time? So if you're right on somebody's gearbox, you're going to get that beautiful toe, and you're going to be going a lot faster than you were if you're by yourself. So you'll need to brake more, and you'll need to brake sooner. A nice trick is to start your braking when the car in front of you reaches your braking markers. That won't help you outbrake them, but it will keep you from running over them, which is usually not particularly appreciated. So thanks for watching, and have fun this week at one of the best racetracks in the world. Bye.